Hi. Boy, that took a while to get situated today. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Always a chore to log in and get plugged in and online and up and running on a rainy Wednesday morning. I was just trying to do a few housekeeping things before, we all got here. And it's a couple minutes after 9, so people are still coming in the door. They're ringing the doorbell and all that. I was going to take attendance. I've been moving the attendance that I have taken over the past 4 weeks into the attendance area of the e-learning platform. And I don't even know if you guys can see the attendance area or not, but I am giving you guys, according to the syllabus, 2 points per day for attendance. Just for showing up, you get 2 points. So showing up is an important part of life. And so I do appreciate you guys showing up and everybody being here, and that's cool. I'm going to take a quick attendance off the participants list and get this party started. There's Autumn and Caprina and Daniela, Danielle. Sorry, I have a Danielle in another class. Zeke, I have no Zekes in another class. Kelsey is here. Okay, and Riley, and Sarah, who got here first, and the first shall be last, right? There we go. Okay, and so I'm waiting for a couple people, Ethan and some other folks. Aiden, let me know. I'm going to turn on the chat box here. Somebody has chatted in here. Aiden is with me. All right, fantastic. All right, today I wanted to start a new project and walk us through, the whole project making thing once again. Now that we're not making squares anymore, but it's still using the fashion magazine as a source material and cutting out shapes out of a fashion magazine to collage into a project. So, we've had some folks join us rather late and or are still working on catching up with some of the projects. So I'm going to demonstrate this kind of one more time to kind of walk us through this whole project making thing. So, okay, let's do that. Let's get us started here. I'm going to refer back to a fashion magazine currently available at grocery stores and stores. So I would like you guys to buy at least one fashion magazine. My personal preference is Vogue. Vogue tends to have the highest possible quality advertising, really great examples of fashion and photography and publication design and layout. All of the art direction that goes into creating ad campaigns and everything is illustrated in here. So lots of the different trades that are involved in the fashion industry and in applied design, really, whether it's photography or actual fashion design or publication design, as this is, are all in here. So I'd like you guys to get one of these. This happens to be, one of many fashion magazines that have really got into a new territory this fall after the all of the protests in the major cities across the country, protesting police brutality, police violence, the killing of black suspects that are in police custody and that kind of thing. So the Black Lives Movement has really influenced a lot of thinking in Manhattan and in New York in the fashion industry. And so we have black models in the magazine more than ever, people of color represented in the magazine, a black designer on the cover of the magazine, lots of black artists represented here. And this is a huge shift. It's a huge change for Vogue and for the other fashion magazines, Elle, Cosmopolitan, the others, because they all seem to have picked up on the message loud and clear that we have lots of institutional racism built into American culture, and that it's not just enough to, you know, want to be not prejudiced and want to be socially woke about the way that we treat each other, but to actually start to come up with some kind of reckoning for how this thing will change. And to make changes means to make changes. And so a magazine like Vogue has made a lot of changes in this, in the art and in the model selection this year, which is really good. So I'm going to change, over to my other video so you can see my top-down video. Okay, and set up myself a little workspace here so that you guys can see what I'm doing. So workspace that I can do all kinds of fun stuff on. And I'm going to get rid of this and talk about our materials a little bit. Just to review, I've asked you guys to get a pad of Bristol board, and if you can't find Bristol by Strathmore in this yellow format thing that is 9 by 12 inches as a format, then watercolor paper comes in the same thing by Strathmore, and it just says watercolor here instead of Bristol. So get something that is a fairly, you know, white, because it's kind of nice to do these things on a white material of some kind. Fairly heavy duty. This is a cardstock. It's not just a paper, it's a cardstock, which means it's a lot more durable for gluing stuff down on, peeling stuff off of, drawing on it when we have to draw on it. This is what designers use to design stuff. And so we want to use Bristol board or something close to it whenever possible. There's 20 sheets in here, gummed in a pad, and so I'm going to pull out a sheet. I'm going to take the template tool that we made in our first project and make myself a format frame that I'm going to do my project in. So I've got the corners cut out of the template tool so that I can simply transfer the corner measurements by making little marks through there onto here. And then with a ruler, all I need to do is connect the dots and I should be good to go. This is a really easy way to make our format frame so that you don't have to try to reinvent the wheel every time. I'm going to try to lift the ruler carefully off of the paper so that I'm not going to push it across the wet ink and smudge the wet ink, because that would be a tragedy. And I'm trying to carefully draw this rich, beautiful, black, sexy line with a black rollerball pen, medium point rollerball pen, so that we have a really well-defined yet fairly minimal format frame for us and a compositional space for us to work in. This is our playground. This is what we work in, the compositional space. And the compositional space is defined by an outside edge and a frame so that we are working with something like this. I'm just going to turn it horizontal for you for a second to play this game here. So putting the template tool aside, I want to turn to this particular project. And so I'm going to do a quick share screen, if it'll let me, to pull up the project. And so we can look at the project all together. So the Word document that's associated with this project has been called Rhythmic Line Composition Project 5. It's got a couple of definition statements that that I've either paraphrased from the book or lifted from this chapter about what a line is and how you can determine a line and what a line does in a composition. So our assignment is what I just did, create our regular 6 by 8 inch picture frame on the 9 by 12 Bristol board. And try to do really good clean craftsmanship practices to get you a nice result there. You can choose either a horizontal or a vertical format. Use a series of lines, and that means create a series of lines to make a composition. Lines are to be cut from black magazine ads and or photos so that they're solid black lines. one or two contrasting lines in a medium high value gray, or a color may be used for some variety in the composition. The lines should be similar in length and shape, but can have some variation. The lines can all be identical if you wish. The composition will use a total of between 7 and 15 lines to create a sense of repetition and rhythm across the composition. So your lines may be straight or curving gently. Line shapes may have either parallel or non-parallel edges. That's fine. And in this design, a line is defined as a shape at least 5 times as long as it is wide, and its proportions may be longer. Something that is not 5 times longer than it is wide is more of a rectangle shape and a lot less of a line, and I really like these to be a lot more linear in nature. So I want them to be at least 5 times longer than they are wide as a concept. And the goal of the project is to examine rhythm through repetition of form. So we're going to create a rhythmic composition using repetition of the line form. All projects will use some aspect of pattern or motif in the repetition of form. There's going to be some kind of patterning to this. Pay attention to the negative spacing between the lines and how the composition relates to the format frame. Create a unified composition through the use of harmony, with most of the lines being black lines and related to each other through shape. And then you're going to create some interest through variety, because a couple of the lines are going to be gray or a color. And then, so we're going to be aware of the other factors of organization, like balance, proportion, dominance, movement, and economy in a composition. All right, let's see. I'm going to go to my PowerPoint presentation next, just to go to this slide, because this kind of gives a sense of rhythm running across this painting, this compositional painting. And this sort of has the feeling of a whole bunch of lines repeated or in various kinds of repetition. Their line elements, their line segments, their line shapes, and they're probably considered about 5 times as long as they are wide. So this gives you a sense of something from an earlier textbook edition, at least, that is a very rhythmic sense of lines moving across the composition. So there's all of that. Now I'm going to stop the share and come back to my my thing here. So I have been at work. I've been cutting out lines and making a whole bunch of lines and linear shapes in a collection over here. But I think I probably should just go through the Vogue magazine and try to harvest one, so you can see what I'm looking for and what I'm trying to avoid. I guess I'm looking for another black, solid black area of composition in the background of an advertisement or a photograph. And so I'm looking at all of these and seeing lots of variety and stuff, but I'm not seeing great big solid black shapes yet. And I'm looking through here. You might also consider some of these colors as a possible line that you could use too, because some of these borders on these ads give you a bunch of different colors that are solid colors to work with, and that can be a lot of fun too. Dark gray is a background color. A deep gray value is sometimes a thing that you can use that's possible. I wanted to kind of choose maybe more of a medium gray to a higher key gray for that. This black jacket that this model is wearing would be a good place to pull some black out of, and if I can't find anything else really soon, I might have to come back to that. Anyway, I'm looking, you know, and if you want to get technical about it, things like a headline is a whole series of black vertical elements that are fairly uniform and that have a rhythmic quality to them. And so, you know, even text has a certain quality to it about rhythmic line as a design kind of a thing. And you're going to see rhythmic lines in the backgrounds and in the textures of many of the fashions and advertisements that we're looking at here. So And you know what? I'm about to give up. I just wanted to say one more thing. Here is a rhythmic line design right here. It's hidden in the photograph. It's hidden in this aloe plant right here that Clinique is very concerned about, telling you that they put aloe into their moisturizing cream, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, forgetting all that and just looking at the abstract quality of the advertisement, we have some very lovely repeated linear lines dancing across the page here. So having said that, and having kind of struck out trying to find something in the Vogue magazine, I'm going to take the ones that I previously harvested, and some of these were in some of the pages that I pulled out for squares that I cut out for 5-square projects, both the value range of squares as well as the solid black squares. So when I had an advertisement that had solid black in it, I've been already sampling lines out of that. And so as a matter of fact, I think I'll do one for you right now. So here's a piece of solid black that was in the background of an advertisement. And I'm going to get rid of this red chunk because I don't like it. And so my idea has been to play with some kind of a gently undulating curving line and to see what happens here. So I'm going to try that again. Gently undulating curving line. You'll notice that I'm using a scissors. So you can, use the X-Acto knife if you want to, but I'm not going to slap your hands this time if you choose to use a scissors. All I ask is that if you're going to cut a curving line with gently rolling curving edges, to please be as smooth and as flowing as you possibly can to make that line. Because I'd really like, the edges to not distract the viewer from the overall concept of line or its shape or anything else. So I'm going to put this one here. I'm going to take some of the other ones that I've already cut out and kind of play with them in the compositional space a little bit, because that's what we can do to just see what happens as we play with spacing and what lines are doing in a composition, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And so we can make something that feels a whole lot like a zebra, which is awfully nice. I also cut out some gray lines that I can throw in here to break things up a little bit, because just a whole series of black lines is really nice, and it provides some sense of movement and lots of harmony, pulling the thing together visually, but also it can just be terribly boring all by itself. And so we might have to throw in something just as a little bit of interest, and or we might also have to throw in something that's has a color to it, and maybe something that is kind of going completely in a different direction. So I'm playing around with some of this stuff just to try to see what the spacing might be and what the negative spaces might look like between the lines. And then I have to ask myself, do I want every line to be treated in a very similar way or not? You can see that I've got diagonal cuts on the bottoms of these 5 lines right here that all go the same way. This one has a straight cut on the bottom of it. Here's another diagonal cut, oh, and that diagonal cut goes the other way, because this one got cut in a different curve in a different direction. And no matter how I move it around, the diagonal goes a different direction. The curve is opposite the curve of all of the other lines. What am I ever going to do with that line? Well, I can do all kinds of stuff. Let's come back here to the tops of these, because as you can see, some of the tops of these are not the same. Now you can, that would be fine if you wanted to keep all of them different or all of them similar or whatever. But for me and for my delicate sensibility when it comes to this stuff, I might just have to, for instance, on this one has a terrible finish on this end, and so I want to cut that on a diagonal so that it matches a little bit more what's going on top and bottom in the along with the other lines in the composition. So something like that, and play around with these. And you just, you have to kind of start playing with these things to see what happens. Now, you're going to probably at some point say, but Mr. Fritz, you're going outside the lines of your compositional space. And you're right, I am. I've got tails of these lines that are tailing out outside of my compositional space. And the question that I have to ask myself as a designer is, does that bother me? Can I break the rules just a little bit if it is interesting or different enough to make people interested in my design? And so I'm going to play around with that concept as we're going here. Or if I made a whole bunch of very long lines and I've got this horizontal composition that I don't like, I could maybe kind of look at this as a vertical composition, which changes things up quite a bit. I could even put vertical lines in a vertical composition and see what happens there, smarty pants, because then suddenly they fit a lot better into the vertical composition. And we can investigate what we like about that design, how many lines to leave in, how many lines to leave out, what fits, what seems to satisfy your sense of aesthetics in terms of composition, in terms of spacing, in terms of how they challenge the outside edges of the compositional space. If you are somebody who absolutely cannot handle the idea that it is outside the lines, then let's bring them all inside the lines and see what happens as close as we possibly can. And I've still got some tails hanging down below this line right here, which is kind of interesting. And if I scooch that one up a little ways, then I've got a tail, at least one line that is up there someplace above that line. And so you're just going to have to play with this and see what makes sense to you in terms of a composition. Because they may or may not make sense. And you have to keep playing with elements to see what works. But you'll notice once you start playing with a whole bunch of lines like this, that there's a feeling of repetition. And the repetition gives you a sense of rhythm. And then when you break up that sense of rhythm by either making bigger spaces between things, creating groupings of one set of elements and then a grouping of another set of elements, and if you are changing up some of the values or colors of some of the lines as you're running them across the composition, all of that tends to really, change things up quite a bit in your compositional space. And, we can change things around and see how different elements will work in different areas of the composition. And we just keep playing with this until we find something that works. Now, I've even got the possibility of this overlapping a little bit, which I hadn't even considered. The black lines don't really do you much good overlapping because they just, once they share an edge, then that tends to destroy the idea of the line in space. But when you've got a contrasting color or a contrasting value, they can then overlap just a little bit, and that might work. You have to kind of play with it and see what works. But I wanted to show you guys that you could color outside the lines and it might not hurt my feelings much. And let's see, I'm going to get rid of this one because I just don't like this one, and play with these. And then see if I've got one more funny element that I might be able to play with over here. It's not perfect. It's not horrible. I'm just kind of trying to see how these things will fit together in a way that really makes them work and play well with each other, and see what might work in terms of a composition for this thing. I also have this really wonderful, big, beautiful line over here, and that might work somehow too. So you might want to cut your lines a little bit large so that you can redo contours and stuff to really try to make your contours fit together so you can have nice, close fitting, tightly spaced negative spaces between your elements. I'm not gonna go berserk if things go outside the lines of the compositional space. it's always nice to be able to know what the rules are in art and design so that you can break them a little bit depending on the needs of the designer or the needs of the client. And so we can play with this. But anyway, when you are satisfied with the composition, with its orientation in space, with the way that the lines are occupying your space and those spatial relationships, then you can glue them down. I wonder what happened if I just switched these around. And glue things down and make some final decisions about what you like as a composition. And then I want you to take a picture of it so that we can talk about them. I would love to be able to critique these bad boys on Friday. They're not due until Friday midnight, and I will accept them late without penalty until Sunday midnight of this week. But I would really like to have 5 of them done by Friday morning at 9 o'clock so that we have something to talk about and look at. So for those of you who jump into these projects and do them early, I'd really like you to do that. I give some special consideration to people who get things done early. So you get full consideration for all 10 points and everything if you jump in with both feet and get this thing done early. Get a picture of it taken digitally and have that picture open on your desktop so that we can share screens on Friday. I'd like your picture of your composition, once again, to be lit as well as possible with no cast shadows on the image, if possible, from your arms or your head or the phone that you're using to photograph the thing. I'd like it as squared up as possible with the phone, if you're using a phone camera, the lens of the phone camera like right over the center of this thing, and the phone parallel as much as possible, parallel to the composition, so that there's no distortion, no trapezoiding of the image, so that we get a really nice square image that shows off your shapes and your compositional space as good as possible. And then, having said all that, if you happen to be, coloring outside the lines and doing stuff that is really bizarre, that would be fine too. And we will talk about that in the critique to decide, if there are enough factors of harmony and rhythm to pull this thing together as a composition. And then, we'll talk about how many factors of variety have you, entered into this thing that pull it apart. And, if we have to, we'll talk about the tension between those two ideas. Are there too many factors of difference in the composition so that it's creating tension in the viewer and it's difficult to look at? Or is there a really nice kind of balance between factors of unity, harmony that pull the composition together, and factors of variety that gives us something just a little bit more interesting to look at? And until you kind of decide how everything fits really nicely in the compositional space, and then can glue it down, nail it down, and commit to that, that's going to be then your final project. So you've heard me talk, and you've seen me do lots and lots of playing around with the elements in the compositional space to see how they relate to each other and how they relate to the space, and how I might find successful ways of putting together several linear elements to create this rhythmic composition of lines in the compositional space. I'm going to turn off, well, I don't even have to turn it off, but I can, open this up for questions. And so if you want to, raise your hand, you can hit the blue hand thing. If you just want to unmute your mic, you can ask me a question. If you want to type something in the group chat, you can type me a question there, and I'll be happy to answer it. Anybody have any questions about this project? Because this is the next thing that I'd like to launch into. And I'm just amazed that you aren't just totally freaked out that I am outside the lines, or that I have a fat purple line in my compositional space, because I thought you'd be jumping up and down enraged about that. You guys, no rage, no happiness, no problem. I do like to cut a few extra elements so that I've got things to play with, things that I can put into the composition and things that I can pull out of it. So what have I got here? Probably 10 or 12 lines cut out for this thing. Right now I've got 7 lines in the composition that seem to fit. I've got this one short line that I never know what to do with. So since I've got this shorty space in here, I could even play with the idea of a short line and a short space just to see what happens. And, so we've got these kinds of ideas going on in the compositional space. All the lines don't have to be exactly the same or exactly the same length or anything like that. They just need to be at least 5 times longer than they are wide to give us a sense of a linear form and not just a rectangle. But you can use straight lines too, or lines that have any kind of a different kind of character to them if you want. So they can be super thin lines, much thinner than these are in their proportions, which means they're much longer than 5 units long for 1 unit of width. And that would be fine too. Lots of spaghetti lines would not hurt my feelings. It's just how much work do you want to make for yourself in this composition, is I guess what we're asking. Because I'm not trying to make extra work for you. There's enough going on in this composition just with simple elements and trying to arrange them in a simple way that I don't need to make it any more complicated than it already is. Can we use colors then? Yes, the question is color. And yes, I would, maybe one line could be have color in it. I found this horrible violet in one of the ads, and so since it had nothing on the back side of it that I was ever going to use in any other composition, I decided, okay, my favorite color is red, but I'll do the purple color. Oh, purple isn't a color, sorry. I'll do the violet, in this composition. When we talk about color theory next quarter, we're going to talk about the names of colors in the spectrum. And purple is a name that they gave to crayons, or it's a name that was invented at the beginning of the 20th century in about 1900 or 1905. But the technical term for the color that is between red and blue in the spectrum, the technical term is violet. And so I'm always going to be talking about violet as that particular hue of color. Okay, sorry, I got off on a tangent there. Any other questions for me? Nothing in the chat else? Nobody else has unmuted their mics? You guys are pretty easy to get along with. I've only been talking for about a half an hour, and yet I feel like this was a very complete kind of a demonstration of what we can do with the compositions and the compositional space. So I may just leave it here for you guys today. And I want to thank you for coming this morning and being in the thing. And ooh, we can play with that. We can ask ourselves next time if this even works as rhythmic lines, if they go in different directions. Oh my God, that would be something too. But however you decide to finalize your compositions, then have them glued down and photographed, and have the photographs open on your desktop so we can talk about them next time, and that'll be great. This is James Fritz. I want to wish you a good rest of your day today, and I'm going to sign off for now. So have a good day, and we'll see you on Friday morning at 9 o'clock, and hopefully some of you will have some of this done. Bye-bye for now.